Yo, this is Jay for Straight Smoke Gaming, and in today's video, we're going to be doing a Brian Thomas Jr. career sim. So, in this video, we're going to sim his entire career in Madden 25. Take a look at what his highest overall he hits in his career and what kind of numbers and if they have any playoff success, if he wins any awards, stuff like that. So at the end of his rookie year, he had a pretty good rookie year, sitting at an 82 overall, has a hidden development trait. When it comes to stats for that rookie year, he put up 87 receptions, 1,282 yards, and 10 touchdowns. So pretty good year considering, he didn't have Trevor Lawrence, his starting quarterback, for a couple games because of the injury that he sustained. Mac Jones came in, and, he's the wide receiver one on this team. He's the favorite option by far. They have plays specifically designed for him, so I look for him to have a pretty good year. Rookie season, he only went 4-13, so kind of a rough year. Going here into year two, as you can see, he's now up to an 85 overall, so that's a 3 overall jump. We see that hidden development trait switch now to a superstar development trait, so that's good. That'll help him, level up higher and get him, hopefully, have better seasons. Wide receiver one, he's the wide receiver one on this team. No one really can compete. There's a 3 overall difference between him and the next receiver. So according to overall wise, Brian Thomas should be the main option for this offense and should see the majority of the targets. So at the end of the year, as you can see, the Jags in year two with Brian Thomas, they only went 8-9, so not really a good year. Not bad by any means, almost 500, but it's improvement from year one, so we'll take it. Let's go ahead and take a look at how Thomas did. I would imagine with improvement, he should have better numbers, and it's kind of a sophomore slump. Only 64 receptions, 731 yards, and 3 touchdowns. So, Brian Thomas, he's good, just had a sophomore slump, so it'll be interesting to see how this impacts his overall going into year three. He was on the field the most. He didn't miss any games, so he's still the number one. He just wasn't getting a lot of targets, it looks like. So let's go ahead and see how this impacts year three. So here in year three, as you can see now, he's now up to an 86 overall. That's going to be a +1 increase from the previous year. Still has a superstar development trait, so that's big. That'll help him keep leveling up. And then, he's still the wide receiver one. Now has a 4 overall gap between him and the next receiver. So Brian Thomas still by far the number one option on this team. He's looking to have a bounce back year from that sophomore slump. And as you can see here, in year three, the Jaguars make playoffs. They end up going against the New York Jets in the playoffs. They end up losing, so they only make it to the wild card round. But, he's still young. He's got a lot of career left. Maybe he'll have some success later down the road. They end up going 11-6 here, so not bad. Definitely, we want to see that improvement every year. Take a look at how Brian Thomas as an individual did. 85 receptions, 1,146 yards, and 5 touchdowns. So a really good year for Thomas. Definitely not on that same level as his rookie season because he had less yards and a lot less touchdowns. But overall, still a good year. I'm thinking that'll help his overall tremendously, and he'll get closer to a 90 overall. So let's go ahead and sim to the start of year 4 and see what happened. So now he's up to an 88 overall. That's going to be a 2 overall jump. Still has that superstar development trait. That'll be something interesting to watch for. And it'll be interesting to see if he can get that up to an X factor at some point in his career. He's still the wide receiver one on this team. Now has a 7 overall gap between him and the next receiver. So, Brian Thomas still by far the number one. He is in year 4, so it'll be interesting to see what they do with the contract as he's coming up to the point where you got to pick up your 5th-year option or you got to start to lock up some of these young guys. So this very well could be the last season for Brian Thomas with the Jacksonville Jaguars. So let's go ahead and sim to the season and see how they do. So overall-wise, they end up going 8-9 as a team. They don't make playoffs. Definitely a little bit of a step down from that previous year as they made playoffs. That doesn't mean that Brian Thomas could not have had a good season. So let's go ahead and take a look at the yards and all that. So 90 receptions, that's career high in receptions at this point, 1,070 yards and 7 touchdowns. So that's a really good year for him. I would honestly take the decrease in yards if it means you get more touchdowns, which is kind of what the problem was last year, kind of a low amount of touchdowns. I'd take 7 touchdowns, though, for your wide receiver one. Brian Thomas is still really young, only in year 4 of his career. So, that's good numbers. I think that'll help him. I would imagine the Jags can't really afford to lose him. So, as you can see here in year 5, he's still with the Jacksonville Jaguars, so he must have got that extension. Now up to an 89 overall. he's getting closer and closer to that 90 overall that I'm sure every player would want to have. Then, they got the superstar development trait still, so that'll help him along the way. Still looking to see if he could turn that into a X factor at some point, but he's still the number one receiver on this team. There is an up-and-comer named Doug Hunt, so that'll be something to watch out for. He's already an 81 going into year 2, so it'll be interesting to see if that cuts into any of his, targets, yards, things like that. So as you can see here, the team, they end up going 6-11 here in year 5. So not really a good year for the Jaguars as a whole, but like we've seen in years past, just because the Jaguars don't have a good year doesn't mean Thomas can't put up respectable or good numbers. So let's go ahead and take a look at those numbers, see how Brian Thomas did. And, he's got 77 receptions, 985 yards, and 6 touchdowns. So not bad. Obviously you would expect it to be a little bit better. As you can see, Hunt did have the majority in yards, receptions, and touchdowns. So it does look like he is starting to cut into some of the targets and all that. So that'll be something to watch out for in the years coming up. Into year 6 now, he's up to a 91 overall. So that's going to be a 2 overall jump. That's big for him. That's kind of like the deciding factor. I think once you hit a 90 overall, you're much better off. You still got that superstar development trait. Still very much the wide receiver 1 on this team. Hunt is getting closer up to him as he is now up to an 85. But Thomas still by far the number 1 on this team according to the depth chart. So I would imagine that would translate in game as well. I mean, don't get me wrong, Hunt's an 85. That's a good wide receiver 2. But Brian Thomas is a 91. He's your wide receiver 1. That's a big jump there. So in year 6, as you can see, the Jaguars make playoffs. They have a little bit of success making it all the way to the AFC Championship game, but they lose to the Kansas City Chiefs. So that'll be something to watch out for. This team looks like they are starting to get good. Hopefully they can bounce back and have another good year as well. They end up going 12-5. So a really good year. That's the best record that Thomas has had from his team in his entire NFL career. So I would imagine that translate the yards. It looks like we got a new quarterback with Josh Allen. Maybe that has something to do with it. But he ends up putting up 80 receptions, 968 yards, and only 8 touchdowns. I'll take the touchdowns. The yards are a little bit rough. You like to kind of hit that 1,000-yard mark. As a receiver, for me, that's what I would go for. I would aim for 1,000 yards a season. So this is 2 straight years where he has not had 1,000 yards. So it'll be interesting to see if that impacts his overall at all, if that impacts his development trait at all, but it does look like he is going to have some competition in the years going forward. So 93 overall going into year 7, that's going to be a 2 overall jump. He does see that decrease from a superstar to a star development trait. I'm wondering if that has anything to do with the fact that he has not hit 1,000 yards in 2 seasons. I would imagine that has something to do with it. He is still, I would imagine, the wide receiver 1. He is. But like I was saying, that is getting close. Hunt is now only 3 overalls away. This wide receiver core looks good. I mean, you got 2 90s as your 1 and 2. So I would imagine this is going to be a pass-heavy season and that Thomas should put up good numbers. But I guess we'll have to wait and see. And as you can see, they make the playoffs all the way to the AFC Championship game again. They were the 1 seed for the entire AFC. But just like last year, we lose to the Kansas City Chiefs again. So that sucks. That's going to leave a sour taste in anyone's mouth to lose to the same team back-to-back years. Go ahead and ask the Bills about that. They know what that's like. But overall-wise, the team went 14-3. So really good year for the Jaguars. They're the 1 seed in the AFC. I would imagine that translates to good numbers. And yeah, I mean, Brian Thomas puts up 103 receptions, 1,389 yards, and 12 touchdowns. So that's a really good year for Thomas. Honestly, his best season since his rookie season. I mean, he put up a career high in receptions, yards, and touchdowns. Just wouldn't think that would come in year 7. I was expecting him to put up numbers like that. A little bit closer to his rookie season, but hey, we'll take it. I mean, you see what Brian Thomas does when he gets the ball in his hands and he has a good season. They're the 1 seed, so maybe that'll be a recipe for years going forward. As a 93 overall going into year 8, that's going to be no movement increase, so that sucks, especially after the career year I was expecting to have a little bit of a higher overall going into year 8. Still has that superstar development trait. that increased from a star development trait now. So that year did save his development trait, just didn't help his overall. I would imagine he's still the wide receiver 1 or competing for the majority of the reps. And as you can see, he's still the highest overall wide receiver on the team, but he now only has a 1 overall increase between him and Doug Hunt. So it'll be interesting to see how that impacts things. Thomas is starting to get a little bit older, so you know how it goes with Madden. Overall start to drop around the year 10, maybe a little bit before. So it'll be interesting to watch in the coming years to see what Thomas can do. And as you can see here, they make playoffs again here in year 8, and the same team beats us again, the Kansas City Chiefs. So the Jaguars, they have made playoffs. Brian Thomas has had a little bit of playoff success, like going to the playoffs, but not much success actually in the playoffs, mainly because of the Kansas City Chiefs. So that sucks. They're the ones that are really stopping us here. The team ends up going 10-7 this year. Let's go ahead and take a look at the stats here. We did know Hunt was getting close, so it'll be interesting to monitor the yards there. And Thomas had a good year, 74 receptions, 1,074 yards, and 4 touchdowns. The 4 touchdowns is a little bit rough. As you can see down there, Hunt had 17 touchdowns. So Brian Thomas is by far not the red zone threat. He did lead the team in receptions and yards, though. So still really good, still very important in this offense. Next up, we're going into year 9. As you can see, still a 93 overall. So that sucks. I mean, he put up 2 good years back-to-back and does not improve the overall. So I do think we are getting to the point of the career where we do see the overall drop a little bit because he does also lose his superstar development trait. And now he's the wide receiver 2 on the team. So we should see a little bit of a downtick in performance, I would imagine. But still really good. I mean, a 93 wide receiver as your wide receiver 2 is still really good. And as you can see, the wide receiver core in general is just good. So I would imagine this should be a pass-heavy offense, and that would lead to good numbers for Thomas. As you can see, they end up making playoffs here in year 9. They end up going to the AFC Championship game again against the Kansas City Chiefs, and once again, they lose to the Chiefs. So that is a total of, 4 straight years that they have lost to the Kansas City Chiefs in the playoffs. They end up going 12-5 this year, so still a good year from the team. Let's go ahead and see how Thomas does. And Thomas struggles, honestly, kind of pretty bad. 49 receptions, 726 yards, and 1 touchdown. So the 1 touchdown sucks. He was not hurt. He played all the games. And, even the wide receiver 3 had more receptions, yards, and touchdowns. So definitely a rough year for Thomas. It'll be interesting to see if this means anything in the years to come. Maybe he's starting to slow down at all. It'll be interesting to see. Let's go ahead and sim to the start of year 10 and see what we're working with. So now here in year 10, he goes down to a 90 overall. It's going to be a 3 overall drop. 90 is still really good. We know that he still has his star development trait, and we know last year he went to wide receiver 2, I would imagine, as a 90 overall. You're still the wide receiver 2 because that's still a really high overall. Let's go ahead and take a look at the depth chart and see what that's looking like. So he is still very much the wide receiver 2. Even though he was the wide receiver 2 last year, wasn't really used like it, so it'll be interesting to see how the Jaguars use him. Thomas is now going into year 10, so he is definitely a vet. He doesn't have a player tag anymore, so he is starting to get older. Let's go ahead and see how the team does. They end up making playoffs. This year, we get eliminated by the Baltimore Ravens. I mean, hey, sucks that we didn't make anything in playoffs. We didn't make a run or anything, but it's refreshing to see someone else other than the Chiefs beat us in the playoffs. The team ended up going 10-7 this year. So let's go ahead and take a look at the stats, see how Thomas did. It'll be interesting to see if he had a bounce back, and he did. 84 receptions, 1,221 yards, and 5 touchdowns. So pretty good year. I mean, he led the team in receptions, yards, not so much in touchdowns. We kind of already figured out that Doug Hunt is our red zone threat, though, as he has another 15 touchdown season. But overall, pretty good year for Brian Thomas, especially as a wide receiver 2. They did have 2 1,000-yard receivers, so this is a very pass-heavy offense. It'll be interesting to see how this affects him going forward. So now in year 11, he goes down to one overall to an 89. Still a really good wide receiver 2. I believe he's still the wide receiver 2. We'll check that here in a second. Still has that star development trait, so that'll help him. And yes, I mean, he's the wide receiver 2 on paper, but if you want to go by Madden's overalls, there's another guy that also has the same overall as him. So it'll be interesting to see, if he's actually the wide receiver 2 when it comes to playing the game. According to Madden, he is, but we'll see because, if there's another guy that's the same overall, it really doesn't matter who you can slide pretty much anyone in there. So in year 11, the Jaguars make playoffs. They're having a lot of playoff success, making the playoffs at the end of his career. Once again, we lose in the divisional round, not to the Chiefs though, to one of their division rivals. We lose to the Las Vegas Raiders. Team ended up going 11-6, so still a good year for the team. I would imagine with that good wide receiver core, some of these guys put up good numbers. And Thomas, not really bad. 74 receptions, 927 yards, and 7 touchdowns. So, I mean, he is third in receptions, third in yards, and third in touchdowns on the team. So I do think that this was kind of the year that he did take a step back, and these other two people, Hunt and whoever the other guy is, ended up taking over that wide receiver 1 and 2 role from him. So it'll be interesting to see in year 12 what kind of a role he has, because I would now imagine at an 85 overall, dropping 4 overalls from last year, still has that star development rate. I would imagine an 85 overall is still good enough to be a wide receiver 3. So let's go ahead and take a look at that, see where he's ranking in the depth chart, because ultimately that will affect his targets and all that, all his usage and everything. He's still a wide receiver 3. Like I was saying, this is still a really good receiver core. You got a 98, a 91, and an 85 as your 3 receivers. So I would imagine this is still a pass-heavy offense. So I would imagine he still puts up good numbers. The team as a whole doesn't really do too good. 5-12. So kind of a rough year for the team, but that doesn't mean Brian Thomas couldn't have a good year, especially as the wide receiver role. We'll see how this works out. He has never been at wide receiver 3 in his entire career, so it'll be interesting to see what kind of numbers. It looks like we did get a new quarterback, so maybe that has something to do with it. And Brian Thomas ends up putting up 76 receptions, 819 yards, and 4 touchdowns. So definitely not really the numbers he was putting up. Still not bad, I'd say, for a wide receiver 3. If I get 76 receptions, 4 touchdowns, and 800 yards from a wide receiver 3, hey, I'm happy with that. I think he had a pretty good year. He is getting older, though, so it'll be interesting to see what happens from this point going forward. And as you can see here, in year 13, he's a free agent. He's a 77 overall now, so he definitely had a big hit, big drop. I believe that's 8 overalls from year 12 to year 13, not actively on a team. I'll go ahead and keep an eye out on this, see if anyone does pick him up. But let's go ahead. I'll let you know what ends up happening. And as you can see, at the end of this season, he ends up retiring. So he plays 13 years in the league. Pretty good 13 years. Let's go ahead and take a look at all his stats and everything. So career totals, 13 years, 943 receptions, 1,200 yards, 72 touchdowns, 7 playoff appearances. I think that's a pretty good year for Brian Thomas. I think that's probably Hall of Fame worthy. It does suck he didn't have the playoff success that you would be hoping for a lot of Hall of Famers. But 72 touchdowns, he was consistently good. The Jags as a whole when he was on the team were good. So it's not like he was some scrub receiver. But when it comes to this sim, that's all we got. So if you enjoyed, please remember to like and sub for more Madden content. And we'll see you in the next video. Bye, guys.